Tucker, the man accused of mailing political pipe bomb packages to 14 high-profile Democrats over the past 4 days. Well, he's behind bars tonight, including 2 presidents were receiving these packages, and this put the nation in a chaotic watch for the suspect for 3 days. 56-year-old Cesar Sayoc, described by those who knew him as a hateful, disturbed man with extreme political views, seen walking in custody this afternoon from the Miami FBI building to an SUV to be transported to downtown Miami's Federal Detention Center, where he is tonight. 56-year-old Sayoc now faces 5 federal counts, including illegal mailing of explosives and making threats against former presidents. If convicted on each, he faces 48 years in federal prison, basically the rest of his life. After a 4th morning of political pipe bombs being discovered, suddenly the FBI made the arrest at an AutoZone parking lot in Broward County. That revealed the man's very unique van, which he'd apparently been living in, placarded with dozens upon dozens of ideological stickers and decals, including one of President Trump rising from the flames of a burning American flag and a Hillary Clinton face in the crosshairs. That van was then covered with a blue tarp and escorted under heavy guard to the FBI's Miami division, all broadcast live on national TV. This afternoon from Washington, the Attorney General said any political zealot who turns violent of any stripe will pay heavily.
We will bring the full force of law against anyone who attempts to use threats, intimidation, and outright violence to further an agenda. We will find you. We will prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law.
Federal investigators suspected that the package bombs may have come from the South Florida Postal Sorting Center, and overnight, sure enough, after evacuating the building, FBI and Miami-Dade police went in, searched, and found bomb number 11, that one addressed to Democratic Senator Cory Booker. It was there but had not yet been sent off to his office. Now, Sayoc has a lengthy criminal history going back numerous years that includes a 2002 threat to use a bomb and a 2014 shoplifting case. Well, those put his fingerprints in the national database, and that helped FBI agents make a match to a fingerprint found on the package sent to California's Maxine Waters. Tucker.
Phil Keating for us in Florida tonight. Thank you, Phil. Dan Bongino, former Secret Service agent, author of Spygate, joins us tonight. Dan, this, I guess this is always true, is not exactly what we expected. When this man's apprehended, he turns out to be a middle-aged male stripper who identifies as an American Indian. These bombs may or may not have been operative. What do we know about this story that we didn't know yesterday? What conclusions can we draw from the facts we have right now?
Well, I can say having worked protective intelligence cases in the Secret Service for many years, which are the cases where we investigate threat cases, basically, out of the New York office, which was very busy, that the pattern here is actually not that unusual. You know, I've actually discussed this on Fox a couple times before, Tucker. You know, when you see movies like In the Line of Fire, a lot of people are obviously influenced by what happens in Hollywood. They think that's the real world. You see this target that's singularly focused on one subject. Taxi driver with, to use the De Niro movie, right? That's not the way it really works in the real world. What you see is pretty common with what you saw with the accused attacker today, where what we call target shifting, where they actually pick multiple targets at the same time. That's more common in the real world, and from our perspective, is indicative of a greater danger than that one person who focuses on that one, so it stalks that one person.
Oh, well, for sure. What do you make of the fact that none of these devices exploded? And I just want to be clear, that doesn't minimize the terror that they inspired. Sure. It's horrifying. But does it tell us something that they didn't go off? Were they intended to go off and he was an inept bomb maker? What can we conclude?
Well, there's only 2 possible explanations for this. One is that he didn't intend them to go off and had done his homework on it and intended them, as you said, to inspire terror. Again, no less devious, as you said, but obviously less deadly if they don't go off than if they do. Right. The second explanation, which I believe is more plausible in this case, is that he just was completely inept. The word you used, I think, is accurate. I think he was just entirely, completely inept, Tucker. I mean, the mistakes in this case, thankfully, incredibly. I mean, and I say that in a positive way. The mistakes in this case are just incredible. Simple misspellings of names, sending packages to CNN where John Brennan doesn't even work. I mean, the use of tape. You know, Tucker, that's how they get fingerprints, tape. That's how latent print officers in police departments get fingerprints, using tape. It's just such an amateur hour operation, thankfully, that I think inept is the proper word. I don't think he intended these things not to go off. I think he was just really bad at this, if the accusations are correct.
If this man did what he is accused of doing, the profile is, I don't think, what you would expect. Again, this is a man in his mid-50s who identifies anyway as a Seminole Indian and has worked apparently for decades as a male stripper. You typically think of crimes like this as being committed by young men. He's not. Neither was the shooter in Las Vegas. Are we wrong in thinking that mass killing is typically inspired or carried out by young people?
Well, in this case, Tucker, I would attribute a lot of this, and I've seen this in some of the investigations I conducted into similar threat cases where the mail was used, whether the mail a threat or not. Narcissism may be at play here, and I mean extreme narcissism. I don't mean looking in the mirror and combing your hair. I mean, when you look at the background of this guy, apparently, again, these are allegations, of course, but a former coworker said he was a steroid user, was obsessed with working out. This extreme narcissism and thinking you're somehow going to change the political process and you're the guy to turn this around, it's actually not that uncommon. And that target shifting is important. That was always a bullseye to me, that this person was a bigger danger than he was letting on if we found evidence that they were targeting multiple people at the same time. It's not just the quantity of people. It's the fact that they are so obsessed with doing something that they're not even willing to focus on one person. They'll get anyone. So it's not. The profile's pretty serious on this.
This is a very weird story, and so I look forward to finding out more. Yeah, I think we all do. Thanks, Dan, very much. Good to see you.
Yes, sir.
Thousands of Central American migrants are making their way to our southern border to claim asylum. Meanwhile, the city of San Francisco, which is completely out of control and filthy, wants to let illegal aliens vote in some local elections. That'll make things better. That's next. And the president, meanwhile, rallying supporters in Charlotte, North Carolina. As we speak, we're monitoring that rally, and of course, we'll take you there live if news occurs. We'll be right back.
And then they go back to the White House. Look at this crowd. It's crazy.
It has threatened to close the U.S.-Mexico border and cut aid to various Central American countries in response to the massive caravan of migrants making its way slowly up from Mexico. Secretary of Defense General Jim Mattis has also ordered hundreds of U.S. troops, about 800, to the U.S.-Mexico border in anticipation of their arrival. Roberto Hernandez is an immigration advocate who lives in San Francisco. He says he's happy the migrants are coming. He joins us tonight. Roberto, thanks very much for coming on. I don't expect to convince you to change your views on immigration. We've talked many times. I know what they are. But I applaud you for being more honest than most on the left in saying out loud what you really want. So I want to use you to inform our viewers about the aims of the left. Tell me what the justification for this group coming here is. If they wanted asylum, they could have applied in the embassy in Tegucigalpa. They're instead coming to our border. Are they claiming that they're refugees, fleeing a war? If so, what war? What is the justification for this?
Good evening. First of all, let's go to our history. You know, here in the Americas.
No, let's not. Let's just go to the question.
The world.
Okay.
Look at all the Europeans that came here. This was Native American land, and Europeans came here.
Okay. You've demonstrated an ignorance of history sufficient that I don't want you trying to educate us. And then I just want you to answer my question about right now, if that's okay. If we just stick to the question, what is the justification, the legal justification, for these people coming to our border and not the U.S. Embassy in Tegucigalpa?
Well, if you look at the role of the United States in Central America, in Nicaragua, in Honduras, in Guatemala, and other countries in Latin America, the United States has promoted wars to protect corporate interests in a lot of these countries. And so you have a lot of people who've been affected by these wars, and it's caused poverty in a lot of these countries. And currently there is a political climate in a lot of these countries, and people are coming here looking for refugee. And
so let's hold on. No,
people.
okay, I'm going to try and take you seriously.
The United Nations is supporting. Okay. Did you know that? But the United Nations is out there right
nothing
now.
The United Nations does matters to me or surprises me. But let me hold on. Let me just ask you.
Through the caravan.
I'm trying to take you seriously. You said most of them in the first caravan are coming from Honduras. What war specifically are you talking about that the United States promoted? Whose interests were benefiting from that war? And when did that war end? What are you talking about specifically?
Specifically, look at the role of the U.S. government in Honduras. I mean, we can go here all day, all night.
What war
but
are you talking about?
Time. So I want to make
just
sure
give me
that
the war. Tell me when it ended.
Understand that okay, let me ask you this: do you know of any involvement of the U.S. in Honduras?
So what you're saying is you don't really know what you're. Hold on. What you're saying is you don't really know what you're talking about, but you're throwing out a talking point.
We need to have a show just to talk about the U.S. government's involvement in Central America and the rest of Latin America.
I'm asking you specifically, what war in Honduras are you talking about that the United States inspired that justifies this migrant caravan? What war? When did that war end? What year? What are you talking about, or do you not know?
What I do. Okay, let's look at the role of the military of the U.S. currently in Honduras.
No, but you said there was a war. So you're totally ignorant of the history of Honduras, but you are lecturing us about our responsibility to let these people in because of a war that we started, but you can't tell us what war or what year it ended. I think that's what you're saying.
And not only that, but it's the involvement of the U.S. in Honduras and Central America. We've talked about this
so
before.
Obviously history is not your subject. Let's go to something.
And that's fine with me.
I'm not sure we're disagreeing.
That the United Nations currently is supporting this caravan. Why would the United Nations be supporting and helping these people? And
not
then
account.
Trump goes
I can't imagine why the UN does a lot of things.
That the U.S. should stop Mexico from letting these people come here.
Let me. We're going to change the category to the 200 category. Let's see if you can answer this. Okay. San Francisco has now announced that illegal aliens, people who have no right to be here, will be allowed to vote in local school board elections. You live in the city. You think this is a great idea. Do you think Americans who sneak into other people's countries ought to be allowed to vote in their elections?
Well, let's look at how many white people live in Mexico. The Mexican government doesn't harass them. But let's look at...
Are they allowed to vote in elections?
Look how many people did not vote in this last election. Look at the numbers.
Okay. I would say as a performance artist, you're talented, but I just want to get at one straight answer. Are Americans who sneak into other people's countries without permission allowed, do they have a right to vote in those countries' elections? Do I have a right to sneak into Mexico and announce that I get to vote there? And if you don't let me, you're a racist. Is that a human right that I possess?
So let's get it clear. In San Francisco, these individuals that are being allowed to vote are only voting for the election for the members of the Board of Education.
Another question unanswered.
And
all right.
these people, right, should have the right to vote specifically for those who are going to make policies and decisions affecting their children.
Okay, so I asked you a couple simple questions. You couldn't come up with an answer. Text me later if those answers come to you. Okay, Roberto, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Victor Davis Hanson lives in California as well. He's a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution in the Bay Area, and he joins us tonight. So it does raise, I think, I mean, tell me if I'm overstating the importance of this, but California allowing illegal aliens to vote in school board elections can be written off as it's just a school board. But how, philosophically, is that different from letting them vote in any other election?
Well, it's the beginning of the erosion of the federal electoral law, as we saw with sanctuary cities. But it's part of a message that we're sending. If you have 500 jurisdictions where immigration law doesn't apply and you start allowing people to vote in local, then it might be state and eventually federal, it sends a message to these caravans that there's already 22 million people here who came illegally. There's another 40 million who came legally. And it's a place where if you get across it legally, you're going to be able to function as a citizen. And then they have a lot more, the caravan people have a lot more strategic assessment, a much more astute one than we do. They have, the governments of Central America and Mexico get $60 billion in their remittances. They want it. Employers, it's a boom economy. They need cheap labor. The identity politics, as your guest illustrated, they want them, and the Democratic Party want. The only people who want to follow the law are your viewers, the ordinary voters without a lot of clout. But I think they understand that there's only two ways to stop them once they get here, Tucker. You either have to have a wall or you have to use force. 800 soldiers, or even the border patrols we saw with Mexico when they crashed through, is not going to stop them. You need 3 divisions. Right. So we don't have a wall. And the optics of using tear gas or rubber bullets will be as bad as children being separated. And that's what they're counting on. Exactly. What we need is what every country in the world throughout history. Saudi Arabia has a 500-mile wall. Israel has a wall. Greece, Turkey, Eastern Europe. Then it changes the dialectic and it makes them try to come through a physical barrier, and they have to be the aggressor. And usually the people who might get through are going to be young males who are easily more deportable than women and children. But we say to them, here's our wall. We don't want to oppress you. Just stay on your side. But if you don't have a wall, then we have to be preemptive and have the whole messy use of force. And they count on that. And I think that's what's behind it. And I'm not optimistic.
No, I'm not optimistic at all. But I also wonder, this is not the end, but the beginning. These migrants are claiming refugee status because of political instability in Central America. But by recent historical standards, things are relatively peaceful in Central America. What if there really is a revolution or another civil war or a natural disaster in any of these countries? Could we potentially get an enormous wave, like a real wave, tens, hundreds of thousands of people on our southern border?
Well, I live in a state where 1 out of every 4 people was not born in the United States, and not all of them, about only 60% are legal. And this is the time when we've rejected assimilation, integration, intermarriage, the melting pot, and have opted for the identity politics salad bowl. So we are getting into a tribal society. And one final thing about your speaker, he said that this Western civilization in California is sort of an artificial construct, but they have many alternatives of indigenous people. They can make a left turn and go south into Oaxaca and enjoy an indigenous person's paradise. But they're going into an artificial civilization, according to the speaker, that they should detest, because he says it's antithetical to the Native American experience. But when we formed California, there were only 15,000 Mexican nationals in this huge state. It was almost empty. So this myth that there were millions of indigenous people here and then they were displaced by so-called white Europeans is historically inaccurate. And we didn't have these discussions when we believed in the melting pot and we had secure borders and legal, measured, meritocratic, and diverse immigration.
Of course, and many Mexican nationals are themselves the descendants of European conquistadors who oppressed the indigenous population. So it's a lot more complicated than we're pretending, as you well know. Professor, thank you. Great to see you, as always. Well, Democrats have been promising America a blue wave for months. Are they going to get it? Some of their wackier candidates may be slowing that wave down. Lisa Booth has been taking a careful look at those candidates, and she joins us after the break. We're, of course, also monitoring the president's rally now ongoing in Charlotte, North Carolina. Stay tuned.
Stop catch and release. End the visa lottery that we talked about. End chain migration. And we will keep the criminal drug dealers and terrorists the hell out of our country.
Law professor Katie Porter, she's a Democrat running for Congress in a basically Republican-leaning district in Orange County, California. The Washington Free Beacon has published documents that Porter submitted to a progressive activist group, and those documents show she supports the creation of something called the Department of Peace Building, dude, as well as reparations for African Americans and lots of other left-wing ideas that most people think are stupid. In Arizona, meanwhile, Democrat Kyrsten Sinema, treated by the press as a real candidate, has lost the endorsement of the State Troopers Association after the members revolted against her candidacy. Sinema has been caught faking key aspects of her biography. She has also called her state, quote, the meth lab of democracy. Welcome to Arizona. And said on a radio show in 2003 that she did not care if Americans joined the Taliban. She's a lot of fun. Lisa Booth is a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Voice, and she joins us tonight. Lisa, thanks a lot for coming on. So first to this candidate in Orange County, California. Is she in step with the voters of this district, would you say?
No, she's absolutely not. And that's what's so crazy about the fact that this race is so competitive, because as you mentioned, this is Orange County. Clinton did win the district by 5.4%, but this has been a traditionally Republican-leaning district. However, Katie Porter says that Elizabeth Warren is her mentor. This is someone she admires. You go to the list of endorsements on her website. It's Emily's List, Planned Parenthood, anti-gun groups, every progressive organization you can think of. So she is absolutely out of step with her district. She wants single payer. She supports Bernie Sanders' single payer system plan that would also give health care to illegal immigrants. She supported California becoming a sanctuary state. So you just go through the policy that she supports, and it is entirely inconsistent with the district that she's seeking to represent.
Can you be a lot more specific about the Department of Peace Building? Would there be a peace building SEAL team that would go out and create peace by force? Or did she put meat on those bones?
I don't know. It doesn't sound like a very dangerous group to be a part of, though. So unlike the SEAL Team 6, where, you know, you go through rigorous training and, so I don't know.
Standards are lower for peace building. Okay.
I think so.
So it seems like a big deal in the Arizona Senate race for any professional organization or union to withdraw an endorsement this close to an election. How did this happen with the state troopers and Carlson Tonight?
It is a big deal because this is the thing. She's been running on the endorsement to kind of bolster her law enforcement and also on immigration issues, essentially border security. So this is a big deal for her. And what happened is the group put out the endorsement and then found out that some members were not so happy about it. So now they're deciding to be neutral in this race. And I think the border security issue is really big because Carlson Tonight has also been part of this group called No More Deaths, where she was part of a group that helped and aided illegal immigrants in trying to cross the border. And this group has said about U.S. Border Patrol that they engage in a systematic torture. So this is a group that's been very critical of border security. And she has also compared illegal immigrants' deaths to that of our troops dying. So this group's been kind of wacky, and she's supported it in the past. And clearly what she's been trying to do is run from all these comments that have come back to haunt her as she's been trying to position herself as a moderate in this Senate race.
Yeah, those remarks comparing the deaths of illegal aliens in the desert to our troops in Iraq really were pretty far out. I don't think that we're shading those or taking them out of context. That was pretty unbelievable. Well, Lisa Booth, thank you. You've been on this for us, and I appreciate that, and I hope we'll see you again next week for more updates.
Thanks for having me, Tucker. I appreciate it.
Well, does your right to free speech include your right to have views that organized Islamic groups don't think you should be allowed to have? Well, a European court has ruled on that. Sharia speech codes have come to Europe. We're not overstating it. That happened, and we have details. Of course, Europe isn't the only place where freedom of speech is threatened. Sadly, in America, our leaders don't support it either. The social justice left, authoritarians in Silicon Valley wage war on speech every single day, and they are winning, we are sad to tell you. That's addressed at great length in a new book called Ship of Fools, available for purchase, TuckerCarlson.com.
We got a season.
Relief tonight as authorities say the suspected mail bomber has been caught. 56-year-old Cesar Sayoc of Aventura, Florida, has been arrested and charged with 5 federal crimes for sending mail bombs to prominent Democratic politicians and donors. He faces up to 58 years in prison. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge, she's standing by with the latest. Catherine.
Well, Dana, senior Justice Department officials held a news conference a short time ago here in Washington. The Attorney General said political violence of any form is in conflict with the democratic process.
This is utterly unacceptable. Political violence or the threat of violence is antithetical to our vigorous system of self-government. It is a threat to that respect for law and process that allows our people to accept legislation, elections, court rulings with which they do not agree. This is the central feature of our system of government. You advocate for your beliefs enthusiastically, but we peaceably and lawfully comply with the results.
Federal investigators seized the suspect's van, covering it with a blue tarp earlier today, concealing pro-Trump stickers. Sayoc's social media accounts also praising Republicans, slamming Democrats, and showcasing videos of himself appearing at Trump rallies. The Attorney General was pressed on why Sayoc singled out Democrats and at least one powerful party donor.
Why was he targeting Democrats?
I don't know, other than what you might normally expect. He may have been appears to be a partisan, but that would be determined by the facts as the case goes forward, and I'm not able to comment on that.
The break in the case came when an FBI lab identified a latent fingerprint on one of the suspicious package envelopes addressed to Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters. 2 additional pieces of DNA evidence from other packages matched Sayoc, who was already in a law enforcement database because of his past criminal activity.
This is phenomenal work with the greatest pressure under an incredibly tight time frame. The work of the men and women of law enforcement here and the work that was done over the last week is something that should make every American proud and grateful. And it's too early at this stage for us to be discussing motivation in this particular case.
And the FBI Director Christopher Wray also asked the public to keep their eyes and ears open because he indicated they're trying to still determine whether they have all of the packages or whether others may be in the system. Dana.
Catherine, I did have a question. Christopher Wray, the FBI director, said like 3 times that these were not hoax devices, that they're doing more diagnostics and forensics. So does that mean if they find out more about these devices that they could increase the charges?
Right. That's a great question. They're trying to determine still whether he intended to construct viable devices that would explode at any path along the postal chain or at the delivery point. Remember, he said there was a cell phone on them, and they can often be used as a timer, as a method of detonation. If they were to find that he had tried to do that but had failed because he lacked the expertise, this could then be an aggravating factor in any future prosecution.
We're going to take it around the table. Ed Henry, you have a question for Catherine?
Catherine, good to see you. I wonder, we heard a lot about DNA evidence, and this seems like a pretty quick turnaround. Obviously, there appeared to be the forever stamps, which are self-adhesive, but there was talk in your reporting about maybe saliva. I don't know if that was from the back of the envelope. What do we know about the evidence?
What we know about the evidence, I think, is really twofold. One is that there was a tremendous wealth of evidence because the bombs did not explode. But secondly, and I think more importantly from the FBI director, that they did quickly recover a latent fingerprint on the envelope that carried the pipe bomb that was going to the Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters. And then they were able to extract DNA from other suspect devices. So they had 3 data points. They all aligned with Cesar Sayoc, and then they had his prints in the database because he has a pretty extensive criminal history and was known to law enforcement. So I don't know at this point whether the DNA was linked from saliva or it may have been a fiber such as or a hair that was attached to that black electrician's tape. Remember, I was reporting about that yesterday. That's like a magnet for DNA evidence.
Juan?
Catherine, so I'm so curious about his criminal background and history. What I've read in the accounts today over the wire services is that he was arrested several times for things like allegedly stealing a suit from a store and the like. But we don't see any evidence of political violence previously, do we?
Well, what we were able to find in our research today, Juan, is that there was a bomb threat. I believe the date was 2002. I don't have a lot more sort of granularity and texture over whether that bomb threat related to a political idea or motivation. But Director Wray said that they hoped in the coming days to have more information about what the motivation was, whether it was political, and even more importantly, whether he was acting alone or he had help from others who were unaware of what he was planning with the packages.
That's a good point. Pam.
And Catherine, that's what I was going to ask you, that these were so many bombs sent pretty much simultaneously. So they haven't told us anything yet about whether he was acting alone or whether he had an accomplice.
I was trying to ask at the news conference, but never got my question in for some reason, about the level of premeditation, right? Because when you're talking about over a dozen devices, that takes a significant period of time for an individual. Was he doing them just in his van, or was he doing them at his mother's home? We don't quite understand the relationship he has with his mother in South Florida, but we were given the impression that he was spending a lot of time in that van, not quite homeless, but getting sort of close to the edge of that. From my experience, 12 devices takes a significant period of time because you got to cut all the pipes, assemble them with the explosive powder, and then he's got to go through the physical process of addressing all of them and then delivering them. So it would have been nice to have that question get in about premeditation, because that can tell you whether for months he'd been planning this, so maybe he was simply a lone actor, or whether it was in a very short time frame, indicating that others may have helped support him.
All right, Catherine, thank you so much. We're going to leave it
Thanks
there
for
with
having
you.
me.
President Trump just spoke on the South Lawn. We have that tape for you. We can play it for you now.
I did not see my face in the van. I don't know. I heard he was a person that preferred me over others, but I did not see that.
Does that bother you at all?
No, not at all. No, I mean, not at all. No, that there's no blame. There's no anything. If you look at what happened to Steve Scalise, that was from a supporter of a different party. You look at what happened on numerous of these incidents, they were supporters of others. No, I'm just really proud of law enforcement. I think they did an incredible job. And I will see you in North Carolina. If they wanted me to, but I think we'll probably pass. Well, I think I've been toned down. You want to know the truth? I could really tone it up. Because, as you know, the media has been extremely unfair to me and to the Republican Party. I think the media has been very, very unfair in terms of the Republican Party and the way it's been covered. And they understand that. They write articles about that. Many of them admit that. But the media has been unbelievably unfair to Republicans, conservatives, and certainly to me. But with all of that being said, we're winning. So I like that. Thank you very much.
All right, we haven't had a chance to hear from Greg. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, I know we're going to be talking about the political ramifications in the B block, but it's hard when you play that clip not to just kind of like respond to what he is saying. Well, let's first talk about the bumper stickers for once. I have a rule. It's like cats. You know, if you have a few cats, that's okay. But if you have 60 cats, it's a problem. Anybody who's got that many bumper stickers, they're not hiding, right? They're not hiding. And I don't care what side of the political spectrum you are, it's a good barometer, right? If you see somebody with a lot of crazy bumper stickers, they're probably crazy. And also, I mean, he was arrested for a bomb threat 14 years before Trump became president. So clearly, this guy had a screw loose before he ever discovered the red hat. So I think that there's a lot, he has a paper trail and a criminal trail that clearly shows this guy was just a bad egg, or hombre, as President Trump likes to say.
And given the scope of how many bombs in many states, the work, you can't stress enough what a great job the FBI did. And I mention that because there seemed like almost like a collective sigh of relief from the Attorney General and the FBI Director. When you think about the year both of them had him.
Yeah, they needed a win.
Yeah, Christopher Wray, since day one, has been under fire from the president. He's been trying to clean up the mess from James Comey and Andrew McCabe. And as many at this network have said for a long time, we haven't been critical of the men and women who put their lives on the line every day at the FBI to protect us. It's been about the leadership that went partisan in some cases. And I think, let's not forget, in your home state, Parkland, with the shooter, there were signs that the FBI missed as well. So they've had a brutal several months. And in this case, they came together and clearly busted their butts and got to the bottom of this very quickly.
They did. And Kirsten Nielsen and Homeland Security, the Postal, Secret Service, everybody just worked together, it appeared, in such a great way and moved so fast. And, you know, a point that you made, I've seen in my career, the people who make bombs usually have a history, an escalating pattern of violence. So it does not surprise me that he had this in his past.
Well, you know what's funny is that I keep going back to this, how easy it is to paralyze and create fear in a country. All you need is postage, all you need is pipe, and one person. There's 330 million people. I think you have to be really thankful that something like this is rare.
Right.
Because, you know, Anybody can do this, and by the way, there, you know, we have to admit that there will be copycats because there always is.
You can't track every single
that.
person.
You know, when we were talking about law enforcement, what struck me was how appropriate Jeff Sessions was in his comments today, because